Hello IS, welcome to your fifth flip learning session, which is on experimental designs and ethics. So experimental designs, a nice easy one, and ethics is a nice easy one. We've combined them together to move through research methods as quickly as possible to give you as much time for as many other things as possible. Extraneous variables. So an example of an extraneous variable, this is just a reminder because these are significant for later on. You've got an extraneous variable which is order, and the example we're looking at is order effect. So the idea that if you the order in which you complete the conditions has an effect on how you achieve, for example, in a test that has nothing to do with the IV. So students always struggle to explain this one. Order effect. The order in which you complete the conditions has an effect on the DV and isn't the IV. Individual differences between people, age, gender, sexuality, race, absolutely anything, memory, IQ, what A levels they do, what level of education they are, huge range of things. And standardization, keeping everything the same for everybody. So the same list of words for everybody, if that's what you're using, same list of numbers, same questionnaire, all of those things. And demand characteristics, working out the aim of the experiment and then altering your behaviour to meet that, so good participant, or to lead you to the screw you effect. Independent groups, all participants take part in one condition. There are two conditions, or more possibly, but at least one condition, and every single participant only takes part in one condition. So they either drink caffeine or they don't drink caffeine. They either listen to music or they don't listen to music. They either drink no alcohol, 2 units of alcohol, or 5 units of alcohol. They only do one condition. It's called independent groups because all of the groups are independent of each other. Nobody goes in is in more than one condition. Example here would be Bandura's Bobo doll study, which some of you might know. So the children either watched this is to do with social learning theory, where you observe and imitate people's behaviour. So there were children in a nursery who watched somebody playing violently with a Bobo doll, and children who watched people playing nicely with a Bobo doll, and then they compared who was more violent, the people who observed violence or the people who hadn't observed violence. So you can only be in one condition. They'd either watched the video of someone being aggressive or they watched the video of someone not being aggressive. Loftus and Palmer, same thing. You have 5 different, they all watched the same video clip, and then they all had one question. They were all asked to estimate the speed, but the question was worded differently every time. So how fast were the cars going when they collided? How fast were they going when they hit? How fast were they going when they bumped? So they all get 5. Each participant only has that question once. If they had all 5 questions, they'd be able to work out the aim of the study. It'd be demand characteristics, wouldn't they? Because if they had the question, how fast were they going when they smashed, and then how fast were they going when they bumped, they think, well, they've already asked me that question, and the only thing that was different was these 2 words. So that must be the difference. Okay. And then repeated measures. All participants take part in all conditions. So first they don't drink caffeine, then they do drink caffeine. First they don't listen to music, then they do listen to music. Example here, dual task study, which is what you did with, or what some of you have done with the problem solving. So you were given a verbal reasoning task to do. The first time you were asked to say the every time, constantly as you were completing the task. The second time you completed a different verbal reasoning task, and this time you had to make up random numbers: 5, 72, 81, 93, and so on. Same with deep sea divers. In Badley, I spoke about context-dependent learning. The deep sea divers went in under the water. They learnt the list of words. They record the list of words underwater, and they also record them above water. So underwater and above water, they took part in all of the conditions. So if there are 100 people, all 100 people would do condition 1 and condition 2. And then matched pairs. Participants are matched on individual differences and participant variables that may impact the DV. For example, if we were testing their ability on A levels, we might test their memory and their IQ, because they are both things that might influence the results. If we were testing how alcohol affects reaction time, we'd have to match them on their average alcohol intake, whatever it might be. Gender, if it was potentially spatial awareness. And then all participants do one condition. So they are matched there, so they're similar to remove individual differences, but then they all do one condition. They don't do both. So in a pair, there's pair 1, person A and person B. Person A does one condition, person B does the other condition. The example here is Keelcott and Glanzer with age and where they were matched on age and family income. If I remember correctly, they were given a cut, and they were observed to see how long that cut took to heal. They were matched on age, matched on family income, it was based on different levels of stress, I think. So they were matched on something, and there's the information on there. If you're still stuck, have a look on that link and it will show you. Have a look in your books, have a look on the internet. Really, really simple. Okay. And then in your booklets, I'd like you to identify which of these is a strength and a limitation of each. And then an extension, if you would like to, is why they're strengths and weaknesses. So individual differences. Where is individual differences most likely going to be a problem? Is it going to be a problem where both participants take part in both condition A and condition B, so the same participants' results are being compared, or are they going to be more of a difficulty when one person is in condition 1 and another person is condition 2? So have a think about how so two different people's results are being compared. Which one is going to cause more differences? Order effects. In independent groups and matched pairs, you only take part in one condition. Is it possible to experience order effects? In repeated measures, you take part in both conditions. Can you experience order effects? Demand characteristics, same thing. If you only take part in one condition, can you work out the aim and can you change your behaviour? Or is it more difficult? And then matched pairs. Repeated measures. Can you work out the aim and can you change your experience the second time, in the second condition? Standardised materials. So again, is it possible to give somebody the same, say, verbal reasoning test and get them to say the, and then do exactly the same verbal reasoning test and get them to say random numbers? No, it would be a problem of order effects, so have a think about that one. So tell me about standardised materials. Of course, in repeated measures we can't use the same standardised materials. Is that a problem? We can't use exactly the same list of words because they'd remember them from the last time. In repeated measures, in independent groups, every single person can have the same list regardless of which condition they're in, removing some of those extraneous variables like the fact that some of the words might be more complicated than others. And now let's have a quick look at ethics. So an introduction to ethics. There's the British Psychological Society, and they have put forward, they're a big group, and they've put forward some guidelines. This was after Milgram's research. So if some of you are familiar with Milgram, you will look at it with Andy as well. They put forward some guidelines that said psychologists had to act with respect to their participants, they had to be competent, they had to act with integrity, so not reduce deception, and they had to act responsibly. Okay, it's not vital that you remember those, but what you do want to be aware of is the British Psychological Society and the fact that they brought in these guidelines. These are some of the things that you have to do according to the British Psychological Society's guidelines, the BPS's guidelines. One of the things you must access is informed consent, and this was after the Nuremberg Wool trials that was put in place when people experimented on people without their consent. If the so basically an informed consent form means that the person, two things, it's informed, the person knows they're taking part and understands the aim, understands what's going to happen to them. So yes, I know what's taking part, and then consent, I agree to take part. So consent means they're happy to take part, informed means they know what they are agreeing to, informed consent. If a child is under 16, you must get informed consent from a parent or carer or guardian, and the same with if they're vulnerable participants. So even if they're adults, if they've got mental health conditions, a physical health condition possibly that might reduce their ability to decide to make the decisions, any reason they might not be able, so brain damage would be another one, any reason they might not be able to provide informed consent. They'd say they're happy to take part, but if you really question them, would they understand what they were agreeing to? Informed consent, a problem with it is that it leads to demand characteristics. So if I tell you what the aim of the study is, you're immediately going to try and change your behaviour. There is all which can be dealt with by deception. So you could lie in the informed consent form. You could not provide the true aim of the study, and then you'd have to give a really, really good debrief. Another way around the issue of demand characteristics is presumptive consent. So you can ask people who are similar to the person who is going to take part, would you be willing to take part in this study? If they say yes, oh yeah, that'd be fine, I probably would agree to that, you can presume that this person would also be willing to take part, and then after that you can debrief them again. So problem with informed consent causes demand characteristics because they know the aim. However, that can be dealt with deception, so not sharing the aim with them, but you have to have a good reason, you have to have an excellent debrief. And then presumptive consent, you ask people about other people similar to them, would you be willing to take part? If they say yes, we can presume that they would be willing to take part as well. A debrief, So a debrief is at the end of the study. The informed consent is at the beginning, the debrief is at the end. And it's after they've taken part in the study. You must, and you could be asked to write a debrief, and this information is coming directly from the mark scheme. You must include the purpose or the aim of the study. So if you even if you haven't deceived them, you must reiterate, re-explain the purpose and the aim of the study, and you must share ethical information. So absolutely everything we're going to talk about today could be included in the debrief. So informed consent, right to withdraw, confidentiality, privacy, all the things that we are going to cover. And then additional optional information. So this is the mark scheme. The debrief, the basic stuff, the stuff you won't get any marks otherwise if you didn't do it. You must include the purpose or the aim of the study and the ethical information. Optional information, your background information, so a little bit more about the theory, where it's come from. You can elaborate on the aims and conditions, you can give more information, ask them if they have any questions, thank them for the participation, and explain that if they have any interest in the results, then you can contact them, they can contact you, and you will share the journal article when it's written up. Another ethical issue, so something that needs to be mentioned in your informed consent and in your debrief, is the right to withdraw. You must be told about the right to withdraw at 3 times. The beginning during the informed consent form, reminded in the middle, and at the end as well in the debrief. Right to withdraw means that at any time you can leave the study or refuse to do part of the study, and there will be no consequences. So you can say, right, I need to leave now, no, I don't want to do that. You can get up, you can leave. But the psychologist is not allowed to verbally or physically restrain you. The problem with the right to withdraw is it then causes can cause an attrition rate or a high dropout rate. So another word for attrition is dropout rate. If people suddenly get to a really difficult bit, they think, no, I can't cope with it anymore, I have to leave. Of course, you have to let them do that, but a problem is that you could have a high dropout rate. And then for the ones looking at the extension activity, you want to look at attrition biased or selective attrition. So the people who dropped out, are they a certain type of person that would then mean that the sample who are left were more resilient or more obedient, and that would bias the sample. Right to withdraw also becomes complicated with payment as well, so you still have to say, even if you withdraw, we will continue to offer you payment, because of course that removing payment would be a consequence. Also, payment might make people feel they're obliged to remain when they should withdraw. Protection from harm is another ethical issue. So informed consent, debrief, right to withdraw, protection from harm. Participants must leave exactly as they have arrived, both physically and mentally. So the way that they come into the experiment is exactly the way that they should leave, both physically, mentally and emotionally. So it shouldn't have any impact on them whatsoever. And they are not allowed to access any risk greater than everyday life. So if they do that if there's a risk that they put themselves in on everyday life, such as driving a car, because obviously there are risks involved with that, or smoking, for example, then if that's fine. However, if they don't expose themselves to those things, they can't be made to. So they shouldn't increase their risk. And the example here is children in the playground. So if you're observing aggression and you're watching some children be aggressive, then as long as it's exactly the behaviour that you would expect to see that they'd be exposed to in the classroom, or say if they're in the playground at school, then then it's absolutely fine. If you start to increase the levels of aggression somehow, as a psychologist, that is not okay, because it's a greater risk than everyday life. And protection from harm can also be listed on the debrief form as well, so you have the right to be protected from harm. You also need to list on the debrief, on the informed consent form, any possible risks to that they might be exposing themselves to. For example, things as simple as, could they strain their eyes looking at the board? Could there be some kind of embarrassment? Are there the basic kind of health and safety slips and trips and falls? Like, could they hurt themselves walking into the room? Or are there really significant dangers? Are they being administered a drug? Are they being what kind of side effects could there be? Okay. Confidentiality, participants cannot be identified. All of their details must be kept confidential, must be kept private. So you don't publish any details, name, location, photographs, schools, initials, any of those things do not get published. And this is under the Data Protection Act, which I'm sure you've heard of, because I bet you've done it for ICT. So it must be, the person can't be identified from any published data. So if you publish your research, you can't go, oh, that's so-and-so from down the road. It must be stored safely, and it mustn't be shared with anybody that doesn't need it, and if you can't justify it. And then privacy, you must avoid invasion of privacy. So you must avoid invading their privacy and not letting them control the flow of the data. These are really similar, but it's really important that you keep them separated. Confidentiality is all about participants not being able to be identified. Privacy is all about, for example, the way you could only be observed. For example, for privacy, you could only be observed where you're somewhere you would expect to naturally be overlooked if you aren't aware you're being observed. So we can only conduct covert, secret observations if there's somewhere you'd naturally expect to be overlooked, because of course you'd already be you'd expect to be overlooked, so you'd control your behaviour. Whereas somewhere that you wouldn't be expected to be overlooked, like your own home, the bathroom, somewhere like that, you wouldn't expect to be looked, and that's why we're not allowed to put cameras in places like that, because it would be an invasion of privacy. And obviously you moderate your behaviour. The way you act in the atrium is hopefully very different from the way you act on your own or in the bathroom. Okay. Don't worry about, if you would like to, we are going to go over this, we should go over this in lesson. If you'd like to, you can watch the 2 YouTube videos which are about Darren Brown, hence the picture, and identify all the possible ethical issues you can with this experiment. So if you follow the link, watch the YouTube videos and identify all the possible ethical issues. So, in the exam, final thing then, you will be asked to identify an ethical issue. And identifying one doesn't mean picking out an ethical problem with the research. It means these are issues that you must make sure you have something in place for. So, informed consent, right to withdraw, confidentiality, privacy, providing a debrief. All of those are ethical issues. So, all studies have the ethical issue of informed consent. This is how most of them deal with them. They have informed consent forms, which they get signed. Say, yes, I understand the information on the sheet, and I agree to take part. And I'll show you the next slide. You'll see the next slide in a minute where you can talk about that. Right to withdraw. You mention it on the informed consent form. You remind them in the middle, and you tell them about it in the debrief. You can also remove your results from the research at any time. So 2 years later, if you want to, you can contact them and ask for your data to be withdrawn. Deception. If you do deceive somebody, if you receive them about the aims, then you must give a very, very detailed, careful debrief. In the debrief, you would offer things like support. So if you think that it might have affected somebody's mental health, then you can offer access to counselling. Deception. If you deceive, you must have a really strong debrief. Protection from harm. You put in place risk assessments. You put confidentiality in place, provide anonymity, and also talk about the concerns in the debrief. So if, for example, the risk assessment would be physical harm, but then confidentiality would be really important if the harm was around mental health needs or mental health condition, if somebody was possibly could develop anxiety following an experiment. It's quite rare that happens nowadays, but if you think about Milgram, protection from harm was a huge one. They were severely affected, and you'll look at that with Andy. So it's vital that because of what they learned about themselves, they learned they were capable of killing a human being, even though they didn't. Confidentiality needs to be in place to ensure that they weren't harmed anymore by their results being broadcast to the public. So this person is a killer. And then anonymity, so they, again, much like confidentiality, they remain secret. You're not aware of their identity, and you provide lots and lots of debrief to make sure that they're okay. Confidentiality, you keep the data secure, safely, locked, physically or password protected, and you give participant names or pseudonyms. So participant numbers, sorry. So instead of you wouldn't call them the participants Harriet and Andy, you'd call them participant 1, participant 2, or pseudonyms. You could make up a whole new name, you could make up a whole new set of initials for them. And privacy is you provide an informed consent, so you make sure they fill out the informed consent form, and then you only observe them in public places they would expect to be overlooked. So on the left, all those bullet points are ethical issues: informed consent, right to withdraw, deception, protection from harm, confidentiality and privacy. Every single study has those ethical issues, which they then resolve by doing these following things. And then you can see after the arrow the kind of things we've just spoken about. I'm emphasising this because in exams, students always really struggle with this one. They always think ethical issues means what ethical problems are there with the study, and it's not. It's just how are these basic ethical issues met, and then they're listed on the side. So we've got an example of writing informed consent form. If you have a quick read of the example here, it's directly from an exam question. And then the mark scheme, so obviously you can go back, you can pause that video, and then obviously the mark scheme is this. You get to get full marks, candidates must include both a range of procedural and ethical points. What that means is in your consent form you must tell them about the procedure, what is going to take place, and also the ethical points, so all of the things we've just spoken about: informed consent, right to withdraw, protection from harm, etc. So some of the things you might include if it was procedural, if you were talking specifically about the study that we've just looked at, would be that the treatment program is non-invasive, so you don't get cut open, you don't get anything poked inside you. Requirements required to be assessed on current levels of functioning, so you must be aware that you will have to conduct you will be tested on currently how you are functioning, how you are working, so a pre-test. Use of trained therapist, how long the program is, explaining you'll be assessed at the end of the program, and explaining about random allocation to a treatment or a placebo, a no treatment group. So of course that would only be relevant to this example here, which hopefully you can have a read of. But they are the kind of procedural, so make sure when you're writing consent form you are explaining the process, the procedure as much as possible, and that is for half of the marks. The other half of writing consent form would be addressing ethical issues. So you must remind them that there's no pressure to consent, so you couldn't say, here's your consent form, you must sign it, because that's not consent, it's putting pressure on them. And something that they would say in this one is it won't affect any aspects of your treatment. You can say there are no consequences to you not consenting. You can withdraw at any time, so right to withdraw. You can withdraw your data from the study at any time, so physically you can withdraw, and also personally you can you withdraw your data. Your data will be kept confidential and anonymous, so that links with confidentiality, and you should feel free to ask any questions at any time, and you will receive a full debrief at the end. So they're not set in stone, the things you have to do, but what you must do is talk about both procedural and ethical issues there. So what's going to happen in the study and the ethical issues, such as right to withdraw, confidentiality, and so on. And then here's three other ways that we deal with ethical issues. Ethics committees. You are going to take part in an ethics committee. You're going to put forward a proposal. This is a piece of research I'd like to do, and the A2s are going to decide if it meets the ethical requirements. And that's exactly what happens in schools in psychology. Cost benefit analysis. This one's probably an extension one, so do a bit more research if you want to access the higher grades. Cost benefit analysis is, does the benefit outweigh the costs? So they might feel a bit of physical discomfort, but is it really, really useful? So it could be an example if we're looking into a piece of research on phobias, and that requires somebody to be in the room with their phobic stimulus. So that would cause them some distress. However, would the benefit outweigh it? Are we learning enough about phobias to make it significantly useful to, say, develop a therapy to improve people's lives? If the answer is no, we wouldn't do it. If the answer is yes, then we would debate that and consider whether it would still be appropriate to go ahead. And finally, punishment. Psychologists who break the rules of the ethical issues, they don't deal with them, they don't provide informed consent, can be punished. It isn't through jail time or anything like that, but they can be called in front of the British Psychological Society, and they can be stripped of their membership as well. Okay, excellent. So that is experimental design and ethical issues.